Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the installment of Scott Selections here for Wednesday, December 9th. Before getting today's play of the day, quick recap of what happened yesterday. We ended up having a very solid day as we went 3-1. We ended up winning the play of the day from the video with Bryant and St. Francis over 147.5, which was available on FanDuel at -108. That was one of the easiest winners you'll get all year. I said that you can't have a Bryant game in the 140s. The game ended up closing in the 150s like I thought it would. Didn't matter. Game broke 180. So it was a very easy winner by at least 30 points. Hopefully you're able to cash that, and hopefully we'll find easier, I'd say just as easy totals in the future and spreads as well. So that's definitely going to be one of the easiest winners you'll ever have, and hopefully we can find a couple more during the college basketball season. Other than that, though, we won the other play of the day video on the NFL as we took Lamar Jackson over 50.5 rushing yards, which was available on FanDuel at -110. That was also very easy. Lamar had the 37-yard touchdown run. He had 52 yards in the first quarter. And then after that, he ended up rushing a couple more times. Cowboys couldn't tackle him on any pass play, and he just simply ended up with 90-something rushing yards. So solid day overall from the play of the day perspective. Then we also gave out two plays in the joint video with Scott Steen on the college basketball video. We split those. We won with Iowa -3, which was available on Fox Bet at -110. Game got close. North Carolina fell behind a lot early, ended up rallying, but Iowa made too many jump shots from the outside. North Carolina's offense still can't really make many jump shots, and Iowa ended up winning that game pretty easily. And then we got our I don't know if I can call this a bad beat or not, but we ended up taking the Kansas Creighton over 150, which was available on DraftKings at -108. They were a couple of points short, but Creighton got fouled on a three-pointer down 3 with 1 second to go. Zegoransky goes to the line, makes the first two. If he makes the third one, it's basically a lock to go to overtime because you cannot advance the ball to half court in college basketball. So Kansas would have had to inbound the ball underneath their own basket, and that just wouldn't have happened. That just wouldn't have worked out. So he would have gone to overtime, probably would have won. But unfortunately, Creighton misses the last free throw to tie the game, and that game ends up going under. So ended up going 3-1, solid day. Kind of wish it went 4-0, but I'm not going to get greedy with it. Very solid day. And we're going to be looking for another solid day here on Wednesday. Now, before we do that, though, quick announcement. I know a lot of you are expecting my college basketball play of the day, of course, because you have so many games. Just to be clear, I think today's card is awful. I was looking through all the games last night. I know that Bryant plays St. Francis again. So if you want to take the over on that one, it's at roughly 156.5, 157. I'm probably going to play it personally, but I'm not going to give it out because I'm a little bit squeamish when it comes to teams playing immediate rematches. You tend to see better defensive showings. You saw that earlier this season with Minnesota and Loyola Marymount, for example, where because they've seen each other, they have the film on each other. You tend to see better defensive performances in the second meeting. But then again, Brian plays so fast, the game went over by 30-something points that this total might not be high enough anyway. But I'm not going to be talking about that for play of the day. Instead, I'm going to be looking at the UFC card this weekend. Huge card. I really didn't like anything else on the card for the college basketball games today, so sorry if you're expecting that. But instead, a lot of very good fights at UFC 256, and we're going to be breaking down a couple of those. I know we ended up skipping last week, and some of you ended up reaching out to me telling me how pissed off you were that I ended up not doing UFC last week. Apologies to that. I agree. I should be more diligent on it because it's been profitable for us for, I'd say, about a year or so. So for that reason, we'll be going back to it, and it's going to be it's going to be on 3 fights that I find a lot of value on. So if you're expecting some fights and I don't get to them, sorry. It just means that I don't find much value with them, but I do find them very entertaining, as this card should be very good. But we're going to stop stalling. We're going to be going through the fights right now. First fight we're going to be talking about is going to be on the prelim card, and it's going to be Billy Quarantillo against Gavin Tucker. And for this fight, we're going to be taking Quarantillo by decision. It's available on Fox Bet at +200 at time recording of 10:26 a.m. Eastern time. Now, a couple reasons why I like Quarantillo in this fight. First of all, if you look at both resumes, Quarantillo is 15-2. Gavin Tucker's 12-1. However, Tucker really has not faced anybody. Tucker has been in the UFC for exactly 4 fights. He beat really just nobody of note. His most notable win is against Justin James in his last fight, who was pretty much a UFC newcomer, who's a knockout exclusive fighter. Tucker's main method of victory is by submission, as he has 6 of his 12 wins by submission. However, the issue that I have with Tucker is the fact that all submission wins in the UFC have come against guys who have no Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu experience whatsoever. Beat Justin James, no belt whatsoever. He ended up beating Choi, no submission belts whatsoever. Also ended up winning by decision against Sam Cecilia, who I don't think is that great of a fighter, but his one loss came against Rick Glenn, who does have some UFC quality Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background. So Tucker has taken advantage on the ground on some pretty weak opposition And Quarantillo is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so I don't think that's going to work out for Tucker. Plus, Quarantillo, I think, is better on the stand-up. Tucker stands at 5'7". Quarantillo is about 5'10". So you do have a height advantage there. If you've seen Quarantillo fight, you know that he's a very well-rounded fighter. I think that Quarantillo should be able to do enough in order to stack up the points in these 3 rounds. Tucker, it is worth mentioning, has never been submitted, has never been knocked out, so he is a little bit of a tank. But I simply just think that Quarantillo, with his size, with his definitive advantage in the stand-up, should be able to get the job done. There's a reason why he's a minus 155 favorite, borderline on the marketplace, and I think that instead of taking that, you're better off taking the decision because of the fact that Tucker is pretty durable, and I think he will be able to absorb Quarantillo's best shots en route to an eventual decision loss. So the first play on the UFC card is going to be on Quarantillo by decision at plus 200 on Fox Bet. Most of the other lines have it at roughly plus 170, plus 160, give or take. So plus 200 on Fox Bet is definitely a solid deal in terms of value, and I'd recommend grabbing that. Now, for the second play, it's going to be on one of the main event fights, or the main card fights, I should say, and it's going to be on Moeikano versus Physio. And for this fight, Fyziev's a pretty decent favorite. Money has come in on Fiziev. However, I really disagree with the steam move. I know Fyziev's gone from 145 to roughly 160, give or take, in the marketplace, where Moeikano's gone from plus 115 to plus 130 or so. I really don't understand the line movement here, and it's mostly because of what both fighters specialize in. The one issue that I have with Fiziev is the fact that he pretty much has no pedigree on the ground whatsoever. He's currently a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is one of the beginning belts, so he's really just not that great on the ground. And I think that's going to be a serious problem because Moeikano is very good on the ground. Moeikano is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai. Of course, for the ground perspective, you have Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is the huge plus there. He's won 7 times by submission. If you look at his UFC results, each of his last 2 wins have come by first-round submission. He submitted Cub Swanson back in 2018. He also submitted Hadzovic in his lightweight debut. The issue that I have here is that I think Fiziev might be better on the feet, but if this fight goes to the ground, I'm not sure if Fiziev's getting up, and for that reason, I think that this price is ridiculous for Moeikano by submission. You can find it at plus 450 on BetOnline. I don't get it. I'm going to take it because I think there's a ton of value there. Fiziev could easily win the fight. Don't get me wrong. This is kind of going to be the long shot prop or method of victory of the night. But Moeikano has a ton of UFC experience. He's been fighting in the UFC since 2014. And if you look at Fiziev, you really can't say the same about him because even though he is getting a fight on the main card, he's only fought in the UFC 3 times, and he's 2-1 in those fights. He ended up losing his debut to Magomed Mustafayev, and he really didn't look great in that at all as he lost by knockout roughly a minute into the fight. Ended up beating Alex White by decision. He ended up winning his last fight against Diakise, and Diakise, however you want to pronounce it, but he really hasn't fought anybody, and now he's favored against a UFC veteran who's an expert on the ground. I think that's a serious problem. I think Moeikano's going to win, and I think if he's going to win, I think it's going to be by submission. So for that reason, the second play on the UFC card is going to be on Moeikano by submission at plus 450 on BetOnline. Now, the last play is going to be on the main event, and it's going to be between Figuerado and Moreno. And for this fight, we're going to be taking Figuerado by knockout at plus 150 on Fox Bet. A couple reasons why I like Figuerado at this line. First of all, 150 is the best line you're going to get. You can find it mostly at plus 135, plus 140 if you shop around on BetOnline, on FanDuel, other books of that nature. DraftKings didn't have specific outcomes yet, so we'll see what happens there. But plus 150 is the best deal in terms of value, and I'm going to be taking that now. Figueiredo is one of those fighters who you have – there's a couple of UFC fighters, just to break this down, who you watch them fight and you realize that there's nobody in the weight class anywhere near this guy. You've seen it on several occasions. John Jones back in the day. You also had, for example, Miocic, who was dominant for a long period of time. I know that Cormier beat him, but there were a couple times there where he looked like nobody was going to touch him. You also have to look at Amanda Nunes, for example. You look at Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. There's been a lot of guys over the years who you watch GSP and you just realize that there's nobody in the weight class who's even in the same stratosphere as this guy. I think Figueiredo is approaching that, and people really have not watched him fight enough. Figueiredo is actually a just ridiculous pound-for-pound fighter, and I still think he's highly underrated, which is kind of a shame because he is so entertaining. In the flyweight division, most people tend to expect decisions. bunch of short guys going through, punching for 5 rounds, really having no power, and then, winning it by decision. That's not Figueiredo. He's 20-1. He has 17 wins by stoppage. This guy is an absolute madman. And if you've looked at him so far this season, or this year, he's won all 3 fights by stoppage with no fight going into the 3rd round. He is just an absolute lunatic, and I think Moreno really brings nothing unique to the table here. Now, Figueiredo ended up winning the title fight against Alex Perez a couple weeks ago. Really just killed him. Won in the 1st round by submission. Perez really never stood a chance. Moreno also won in the 1st round of his fight, which was on the same card, actually, as he ended up beating Royval. However, there was a little bit fluky, as Royval ended up pretty much separating his shoulder on the ground, and he ended up just being stopped with 1 second left in the 1st round. Royval wouldn't have won the fight. Don't get me wrong. Moreno just took him to the ground, ragdolled him, and Royval just didn't have any answers on the ground. But the issue I have with Moreno is the fact that he's pretty much ground dependent. He's 3 wins by knockout, 10 wins by submission, and 5 wins by decision. The only problem there is that he's definitely a wrestling expert, as he's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The problem is the fact that Figueiredo is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I do expect Figueiredo to stop any of Moreno's advances on the ground. And I think in the stand-up, I think Moreno is screwed. I've seen Moreno in the stand-up. I don't think he's very good at it. I think he's fine. But you compare him to an elite-level striker like Figueiredo for 25 minutes, I think Figueiredo is going to clip him. I think Figueiredo is going to send him to the ground, and I do think that he will win this fight by knockout. Now, if you want to be a little bit safer, you could take Figueiredo inside the distance at roughly -125 on Fox Bet, but I really just don't see a submission being a path to victory for Figueiredo. There is a chance he could end up going, for example, for a reversal, do something like that, or maybe just try to embarrass him by going for a submission. I don't see that. I think Figueiredo knows if he keeps this fight in the stand-up, Moreno has absolutely no chance to win. And I think Figueiredo eventually will clip him with his just ridiculously underrated power. And I do think that he will defend his belt once again. Probably win this fight in the 2nd or 3rd round, but I do think Figueiredo by knockout at +150 is definitely a solid price to take. So for that reason, the 3 plays here that I like on the UFC 256 card this weekend are going to be on Quarantillo by decision at +200 on Fox Bet, Moeikano by submission at +450 on Bet Online, and I also like Figueiredo to win the main event by knockout at +150 on Fox Bet. All 3 of those lines available at time recording of 10:35 a.m. Eastern Time. That's been Thomas Scott Selections. Good luck to all of you and your respective best today. Bye, everyone.